This Penn Woods on April the 18th of 1979 in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And I'm interviewing an old friend of mine, Charles Cummings. First knew when he was the editor of Phil News. He later became the manager of the Public Relations Department, retired in that capacity. However, he has been continuously active in many different things, including the Washington County Historical Society. I believe he's currently president of that society. And if I remember correctly, he also received the Man of the Year, or individual member, Historian of the Year award for Bartlesville during this past year. Has also been active in the Oklahoma Heritage Association in many different capacities, and is one of the principal leaders in the Green Country, which is active in the civic and economic and tourism development in eastern and northeastern Oklahoma. Charles, I'd like, you're Charles E. Cummings. What's the E stand?
Edwin.
I'd like you to start off, as we did on most of our interviews, by telling me who your parents are or were, including your mother's maiden name, and how they came to this area or to the Henryetta area, if they did.
My father was Charlie Martin Cummings. He was reared around Heber Springs, Arkansas, and he came to Oklahoma. He served for a while as a guard at the Cummings State Prison Farm in Arkansas, and he married a lady in Little Rock and worked there for a while. Then he came around 1900. He came to around Purcell, and he met my mother, who was an Andrews. In other words, her name was May Andrews, and her father, W.C. Andrews, was an old school teacher in Indian Territory back and around Purcell. And the family connection, the Andrews, they came out of Tennessee, where they were judges, and they were pretty nice people. But Dad came out to Purcell. He met my mother, and they got married and run off and went to Fort Worth. And somehow or another they wound up around I suppose it must have been 1903 or 4, they wound up in Henryetta, Oklahoma, because the coal mine was just getting started. My dad was a coal mining engineer. In other words, what they call a hoisting engineer. He'd run the cage up and down. And my daddy was also on the Oklahoma State Mining Board. He served in that capacity for several years, and they went around the state giving tests to people who work in the coal mines. Another one of my counterparts, as we was both raised in Henryetta, was old Dick Stubbs, who you know. Dick is now president of the Heritage Association, but Dick and I were raised there on the east side of Henryetta. We moved out to Victoria Mines, which is 5 miles west of Henryetta, and there my dad worked in the coal mines, and I got very well acquainted with all the Italians. There's mostly Italians in those early days running the coal mines, and they had some funny characteristics. I think most of the things, most of them dip snuff. And of course they drank lots of Choctaw beer. But I left Henryetta in in fact I was born in Henryetta in 1911. September 23rd, and the street there at Henryetta, Cummings Street, was named after my father, and my house still stands there where I was born. I finished the 9th grade in Henryetta High School, went up to Okmulgee where I finished high school, went to East Central University at Ada and got a BS degree, came back, started teaching school, taught school about 12 years, and taught in a two-room school in Okmulgee County. Taught in Okmulgee High School and Durant High School, where I was wrestling coach, assistant football coach, and about everything else. They finally started me out of teaching profession. In other words, and when the war started, the Second World War started in 1942, actually 1941, I joined up for the Navy in 1942 in February, and served 4.5 years in the Navy during World War II. I went in as an enlisted man, and I was promoted in field to an ensign and later on to lieutenant. So, and I served all over Africa and Europe, and and was on the invasion of France, and came back from the war. I lost my hearing, and I had to wear one of those big hearing aids. They're modernized now, but I lost my hearing during the invasion of France. Came back to Oklahoma, and during the war we were offered a job back. We wanted, but I chose not to take my job back in Durant. I went on and got my master's degree in Oklahoma University in historical research, by the way. And then I went on to Columbia and worked on my PhD, and came back to get a job. And in 1945, 46, I was discouraged about the teaching place, particularly salary and opportunity, so I went to work for Phillips Petroleum Company in September the 1st, 1946. I went to work on a pipeline for Phillips. Back in the days, as a safety engineer. In those days, it wasn't too safe. In other words, we learned a lot on the pipelines. We learned not to smoke around gasoline, but basically I served my apprenticeship on the pipelines from Borger, Texas to East Chicago. I transferred into the public relations department, where I was assistant on Phil News. I was then assistant manager. Then later on, I was promoted to editor Phil News, which position I held about 12 years. In fact, this gave me an opportunity, of course, to travel extensively throughout the company operation, meet most of the people. And, of course, in my writing of the story, I really got an education on the petroleum industry. I then was over Phil News for a while, and I transferred into the strictly public relations. In the last few years I worked for Phillips, I was director of public relations in Oklahoma, and because when I retired, I wanted to keep a base of people I knew. Now with Phillips, I learned a lot of things. Particularly, I was a fortunate associate with the leadership of Phillips Petroleum Company and other oil leaders for many years. And I think from those gentlemen, those entrepreneurs we call them, I learned a whole lot. In fact, I learned that I can remember Stanley Lerner used to talk to me a lot. And Stanley was one of our chairmen of Phillips, and Stanley always taught me, he says, boy, he says, think big. Don't ever think small. In other words, when I'd come in with a program and I'd say, we're going to raise 100,000, he says, raise $1 million. And he really taught me that you've got to think big, and also you got to act big. I remember, being reared in depression and practically starving most of the time, I never did learn how to spend big money. It just went against my grain to spend money. And so I recall one time down in Fort Worth, we were flying to Houston from West Texas, and we got a snowstorm, had to land in Dallas. And I remember that one of the station wagon guys there, took us into the depot at Dallas, and we were going to catch a train on down to Houston to make our appointment. Paul Endicott, Stan Leonard, and quite a few of other people. I remember the guy who hauled us 2 miles over to the station, and I gave him $10, and I found out later on, Stan said, give him 25, so I had to learn how to spend money. Now, Phillips, of course, I think history is a funny thing. I think in my mind, I could almost sum my life up that I've been an organizer. The big people have to have people to organize. Someone has got to do the work. Someone has got to lay the foundation. And I remember that, in my experience, you couldn't make a mistake. These guys are professionals. They won't expect perfection, and they always get it most of the time. But I remember that history also teaches us, we got to take advantage of it's got to be the right time. And I remember that back in the early days, I was on President Eisenhower's first people-to-people program when they were talking about getting along with the rest of the world. And I was way ahead of my time. I attended meetings in New York with the letter writing committee. I remember Ann Lord Strauss, quite a famous name in the country, was our chairman, but I spent several years on a international letter writing committee, and I also was a member of the first public relations committee on the Eisenhower program. And then about after 3 or 4 years, I think this was before Phillips management went into the international field. They thought I was pretty well far out, so I was a little bit ahead of my time on that. But I got a lot of good experience. I also served on the national board of the International Letters Association, and there I worked with the Canadians and the Mexicans. In fact, I set up a editorial group in Mexico City, But I learned a little bit about getting along with our international friends, and in other words, we couldn't go to Canada and talk about our little brothers. In other words, they are real people. And then I organized the first historical committee of the Oklahoma Petroleum Council and was its first chairman. And as Penn said, I've been very active in the Oklahoma Heritage Association. And there I worked with another old master, probably one of the great guys of Oklahoma history was Stanley Draper, Mr. Oklahoma City. And Stanley taught me an awful lot about the years I worked with him on raising money and, and promoting deals, because he was probably one of Oklahoma's great promoters. And he mentioned Green Country as probably, Green Country was one of the great organizations. Back in 1965, the lakes, all these lakes had been completed, and we had a lot of big lakes. We had a lot of beautiful scenery. We had a lot of attractions like Kill Creek, Willow Rock, Fellbrook, and we just had a terrific history story to tell in Eastern Oklahoma to potential visitors. And at that particular time, I remember that the Eastern Oklahoma was #1 on the welfare rolls of the United States. We were #1. Today, in 1979, we're number 21. So we made a lot of progress the last 14 years. You remember the Green Country program has been a mimic, or you might say pattern, all over the United States. Particularly in Oklahoma, Governor George Nye, back when he was lieutenant governor, he started. He patterned 5 other countries on the Green Country pattern, and as today they're very successful. Last year in Oklahoma, it was a $2 billion tourist business, and today it'll exceed that. When we first started the Green Country, I mentioned about the timeliness of doing things. In other words, we just at the right time. There was a time for Green Country to be born. The idea was sound; it was needed. And I remember. I've also been connected a lot with politics all over my life. I served as district chairman, district publicity man, and county worker and precinct. I've been very active in politics. But I remember that in 1965, in the spring, I was a forum director of the Partyville Chamber of Commerce, working with John Houchin. No, working with Bob Musgrave. He was president at that time. So I prevailed upon Bob Musgrave, who was a great Republican, and I was a great Democrat. But I prevailed upon Bob Musgrave to invite Ed Edmondson to speak to the Bartlesville Chamber of Commerce annual forum in July 1965. And Ed Edmondson, who was at the time Congressman, 2nd District, made a tremendous speech that night. He did the usual bragging on what a great city Bartlesville is, and all of our higher educational level, and our number of outstanding, people. But when he got through, he said, "Well, but I want to know what you're doing to help the people across the county line." He said, "Oh, Bartlesville's got everything, but surrounding your area, we got the highest welfare roll in the country. So what are you guys doing to help your fellow neighbors?" And of course, we wasn't doing anything much. But Bob Musgrave and I talked to him, and I remember we was at I think the new school out on the west side, new high school out on the east side of town. And I said, "Bob, let's do something about Ed's speech." He said, "Well," he says, "now, Charlie," he says, "he's a Democrat. You want to do something with Democrat?" I said, "No." I said, "That might be right." But Bob said, "Okay, Charlie, we'll go with you because it's a good idea." And so and Bob agreed to help host a meeting of Green Country potential people. And now another thing that made it work was also Bill Keeler, who was president of Phillips Petroleum come that time and was to be the next chairman. He also was chief of the Cherokees. And the Cherokees in East Oklahoma made up most of that welfare rolls over at that time. So Bill was very interested in getting some more jobs in East Oklahoma. And of course, tours and recreation were the natural because we had the attractions, we had the lakes, we had the historical attractions, and we had everything. And all we had to do to create jobs was to promote the heck out of Green Country, and so we did. We began to in 1965 to 68. We just got the Green Country program going, and it took us 2 or 3 years to get the counties to quit fighting each other. because we confessed and found that tourists and visitors don't care or know where the county lines are, but they do know where eastern Oklahoma is. And so we called a meeting, and I talked to Bill Keeler. Yes, sir, it's the thing to do. I talked to Stan Leonard and Phillips Maynard. Yes, sir, it's time. Because now another thing that made this thing work was that it was just the beginning of the time when the large corporations and business began to realize they had to participate in the social program of the United States. We just couldn't sit back and do nothing. We had to lend our support financially and personnel wise to helping the community. So it fit Phillips pistol. And so I talked to Bill. Yes, sir. When do we start? And we got Bill was the president, Stan Lerner was the chairman, so we got Stan Lerner to host the first meeting of our 16 counties in Green Country. At that time, Oklahoma Northeast, we met on the 19th floor of Phillips, the boardroom. We had represented 16 counties, and we organized right there the first Oklahoma Northeast. Got a constitution, we got a president, and we began to have meetings. And of course, we first started out we were going to just create new jobs in industry, but we soon found out that the great number one attraction was tourism. So we, 68, we raised $5,000 to hire an agency to recommend a program they would put on to sell Eastern Oklahoma. So the Beals Advertising Agency out of Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Fort Smith came up with a Green Country program, and we bought it real quick. And that most of our success, a lot of it was due to the right name at the right time. You remember we had one great objective, Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath had painted a poor, sordid picture of Eastern Oklahoma throughout the world. And unfortunately, his book sold heavy throughout the world, and most people didn't realize there's anything out here in Eastern Oklahoma except lazy people, sandstorms, and in fact, it was a very dismal-looking picture. Of course, Steinbeck never came to Oklahoma. He really wrote a story around Sallisaw, but it was pretty drastic. So we had to set out and change the image of Eastern Oklahoma. And we did. In other words, in 14 years, we changed the image of Green Country from a desolate wasteland that Steinbeck painted to a water vacation land, and they're coming from everywhere. And in fact, I'm afraid someday we're going to have to wreck the fence. For example, the first year we started Green Country, we hoped to raise an extra $1 million from tourism revenue. We doubled that. We doubled it each year. And in fact, in 1978, the revenue from Green Country and the Green Country on tourism and recreation will exceed $700 million. Now that's lots of jobs and lots of employment and lots of investment opportunities for people. We didn't. In other words, it's still a private enterprise operation. We raised money throughout Green Country. We raised about $60,000-$70,000, and our Green Country leadership, which is the main reason why the Green Country went over, we went to Oklahoma City and sold the state legislature on matching the money we raised. 1968, the legislature led by Bill Willis, late Speaker of the House over Tahlequah, they got. They appropriated to Green Country at that time $65,000, and next year they raised it to $85,000. Next year, $125. Now it's over nearly $300,000. The matching fund for Green Country, and today we have no problem on getting the legislature to fund Green Country because we bring into the state $100 for every dollar they spend on it, and there's a lot of things about that penalty. Mostly we raise the taxes. We raise lots of taxes, but primarily, I just heard a man talk today in Muskogee at our meeting, Pendleton. He's telling about a big company that just moved into Pryor, and a lot of it is the Green Country people, Green Country stores, and because business is looking for economical recreation for their people, and they can't beat Green Country. Within a few miles of anywhere on Green Country, you can hunt, you can fish, you can see. We have the greatest oil ranching in heritage, I guess, in the world. And let's see, what are the other
We
things?
have about 6 of these area countries now, 6 or 8. Was Green Country the first of these?
Green Country was the number one. Now, actually, the truth of that is this, Pendleton. When the bus driver and I talked about forming Green Country, there was no one other country. There was it was called the Great Northwest, Oklahoma Northwest. But Oklahoma Northwest had never been very successful. So actually, I borrowed the Constitution, and we wrote ours from the Oklahoma Northwest. But then when we took off, and of course they're now Red Carpet Country. But
was it a result of the
yes.
country that the Lieutenant Governor George Nye inaugurated these other countries?
Yes, I put that in tape while you were going. Okay. Now let's see what else we can. What else is important? Now I can tell you, for example.
What have you said about have you talked about Phillips?
Yes, I've talked about Phillips, and I've talked about some of my impressions of Phillips, and I think that from the public relations angle, I think Green Country, and I think they'll admit, Green Country has probably been one of the premier public relations enterprises that they put on. Now, they put lots of money. The first 4 or 5 years in Green Country, we started, I worked full-time at Green Country. The fellows paid my salary, my expenses, and I worked full-time organizing Green Country. And they still are the primary supporter. They give a tremendous contribution in manpower and money still. And in fact, for example, we just got back to Muskogee today, and 5 people, business leaders, went down to Muskogee. So Phillips has this is one of their primary public relations angle, and I've watched it grow in the years. When I first started in Green Country, I heard there's a lot of complaints about Phillips. So particularly, they're a pretty aggressive company. These companies are aggressive. Particularly in the early days, they were aggressive. Had to be, but we have, I know now that we have thousands of friends in Oklahoma because, the cardinal principle in public relations, Penn, is you got to do good before you talk about it. And I think we've got our people convinced. We mentioned something about the business enterprise has got to be interested, active, and helping the community, And I think we convinced a lot of companies that this is a good way to go. Now, we've also, Phillips City Service has also been with us. John Steiger and City Service have been very helpful to Green Country, along with the Southwestern Bell, Public Service, OG&E, all the banks. I think we only got 2 banks. But the business community, Green Country, is a business operation. And, some of the people concerned, Fiddler, it's volunteer, and we brag about it. That, in other words, we never have had any paid. We had a paid exactly 2 years. Now we don't. They're paying me a little bit. I said last year that I wasn't going to spend all my time on Green Country unless they at least give me enough to, I could get above Social Security. Because if I don't have to tell you, Pendleton, I don't mind telling this history, but the inflation is hurting the hell out of the old people. Because we're losing about 10% a year, and something's going to have to be done. And so Phillips and Green Country has been almost synonymous. And in fact, we've given we honored Bill Martin, the present chairman, with the first Mr. Green Country Award, which is an outstanding award. We awarded the second one to Bob Sellers, the chairman of City Service. We awarded the third one this is not too long ago, to Jim Lake. Jimmy Lake has been a tremendous booster of East Oklahoma and every other thing he's in. So the Green Country program is very successful.
Since you are in public relations, Phillips, I'd be interested in if you have not already done so, in your telling some of the other projects that Phillips has been instrumental in. In other words, things that they have played more than just an ordinary role.
Well, Phillips Petroleum Company we've always had a very outstanding nationwide employee group, In other words, the Frank Phillips Men's Club, founded after by Frank Phillips, and he gave a grant of money to all the clubs. Throughout the country, Frank Phillips Men's Club, which is made up of Phillips employees, has always been a great organization in every area. They help the company help themselves. They usually have a clubhouse, and I think we were one of the I think our company clubs like that are outstanding. We've also, at one time back, I worked in what they call a Frank Phillips stock plan. Every employee of Phillips Petroleum at one time owned at least a share of stock at Phillips. We were one of the front runners in pushing ownership of our stock among employees, and today the percentage is still high. And Phillips has always been a leader, and of course they built the first synthetic rubber plant in Borger, and they've been a leader in synthetic rubber. I worked at Link with Billy Parker in the early aviation. You know, one of the Phillips greats was old Billy Parker, and Phillips was a pioneer in early days with, in pioneering business flying. And I had the good fortune to travel with Billy Parker as his publicity man over most of the United States, where Billy would fly the little pusher plane, and we'd always to offset the modern jets. I remember at Miami. We was on the Miami several years back, and I was handling Billy's publicity, and we were in. I finally talked to Arthur Godfrey, and we were interviewed on CBS, for about 30 minutes, and Billy Parker was going to take off the new Miami International Airport when it was dedicated. Billy was to take off second, and the president of Brazil was there, and he had his big plane, and when it all got ready to start, and Arthur Godfrey was talking, giving his spiel on television. They couldn't start the guy's plane from Brazil, and by golly, old Billy Parker got off first, and we got all the publicity on that. And that I could go on for years on Phillips, but I think Phillips is an outstanding company because they've had outstanding management. And Willow Rock Museum is, of course, was a ranch owned by Frank Phillips. And although he and Aunt Jane, his wife, didn't get out there much, they did. It was their retreat, and they had a lot of acreage in his home out there. And Frank, of course, founded. He gave the money and a lot of stock to found the Willow Rock Museum, and hired outstanding curators to start out with. And today, it's one of our premier attractions in the United States and the world almost. And of course, we promote heavily in green country. In fact, I just got back in California, and I saw, and my aunt's home was 4 or 5 pictures of original Charlie Russell paintings. Some of the great Charlie Russell paintings and Remington paintings are hanging in Willow Rock, and it's world famous. And of course, it's promoted most of them out. And of course, we tell that story in green country, that we got the greatest museums in the world. Now, Phillips has also been a family company. It's getting away from it now, Pendleton, but back in those days, I know when we finally got every employee in Phillips Petroleum Company, a stockholder, that Paul Endicott, Stanley Leonard, Bill Keeler, all the leadership, we got in the planes and we flew to almost every chapter, about over 120 locations in Phillips, where we gave them a big dance and a big dinner, and we were really proud of them. And Phillips was a family company, but of course it's changed, but it was a great family company. And of course Frank Phillips was able to give all this money back in those days, Pendleton, because there wasn't all taxes. Now they could make money and give it away, but not anymore.
You mentioned the Frank Phillips Club. Now, are there also some Jane Phillips clubs?
Yes, also Aunt Jane Phillips, they give a lot of big contribution. They set up the Jane Phillips clubs, and the women have a organization throughout the United States, and they're very active. And they one of their primary fundraising groups is they contribute to the Denver to that big hospital, that Jewish hospital at Denver. And so there's a lot of things about Phillips. Now, what else do you need?
I'd like to know about the Phillips home restoration.
The Phillips restoration of the home came up the usual way. In fact, I was chairman of the opening of that home. Did you come up on that? We had a local committee, but actually, Bill Irwin and his wife, who was a Gray, in other words, they had been working for quite a while to make a contribution of this, which they could write off, of course, So I think they finally got all the papers worked out, and I think they got a write-off, I believe, for $500,000. But it's been a great thing, and we had the dedication, and today it's one of our premier attractions in the state is the Frank Phillips home. And of course, the Frank Phillips Foundation, of course, is in other words, that was started about 4 or 5 years ago, the Phillips Foundation. Before that time, Frank Phillips set up, I think they started out with, I believe, 25 scholarships to students to go to college. $400 a year. Today, I think it's over 100. But over 100 of our students, employees kids, children employees are able to obtain 4-year scholarships to a college of their choice, and that's also a good program.
Now, let's talk about you're president now of the Washington County Historic Society. Why don't we talk about the organization of that and of the history room?
Actually, Mr. Pendleton, I was on the Largeville History Commission, which was organized by the mayor here some 15 years ago, and our purpose was to establish the history room and to supervise writing of the history of Washington County, which you know now has 2 volumes. And Phillips gave a contribution, I think, of $50,000 or something. It was a pretty good-sized contribution toward this creating this history room. And we took that money, and from that we were able to, start the history room. But also Mr. Endicott, Paul Endicott, and many others. Phil Phillips, for example. I want to be sure and get Phil Phillips. Was one of our early benefactors. He was also on our history commission, historic commission. But Phil, the first time when I began to say we're going to have to get these early papers. I was working with the Historic Society. I said we're going to have to get the county papers microfilm before they're all gone. So Phillips let me go on a program, and the public relations department, I think they gave us $25,000, and I was able to. And Phil Phillips bought a microfilmer and gave us $1,500. So we microfilmed all of the papers in Washington County. Now, I also worked with Kansas Historic Society, and we microfilmed what they had to see, and worked with State Historic Society. So we've got all these papers microfilmed, the early history of Bartlesville, and I think I just talking to our editor of the director of the history room today. We're gonna have to go back and do a lot more microfilming these articles before they're gone. Now, so you asked me about. Yes, this is my second round as president of Washington County Historic Society, and I felt like it's time to be president again. I mean, they did because after we were about 14 years old, and we needed a lot of young blood, and we had another group organized here 6 months ago. They wanted to organize on preservation of historical places, and they went around a while, and finally they came to us. Our board did not too long back, and they decided that they'd be better off to join hands with the Washington County Historic Society, and so we set up a committee. And now they are a part of the Washington County Historic Society, and we'll set them up as a kind of a big committee, and they'll handle that. And I think Pendleton, we got a good young group there, and I think they'll be working with the state historic group and everyone in society and everybody on getting some of these homes open to the public tours. Maybe sometime restoring the old Washington County courthouse. But first, they voted last night at a board meeting, Monday night at a board meeting. They voted to first make a survey of what ought to be done from the preservation angle. So we're moving on that. In fact, we have. So we're moving on that. In fact, we have the Dewey Hotel. Another one of our projects early was to renovate the old Dewey Hotel, which is one of the landmarks of this area. And so we have spent probably in the last 10, 12 years, we probably spent nearly $100,000, and we're getting the floors handed now. It's going to be open again it's going to be open the 1st of May, and it's really on the move. And we got I was also connected with the Phillips room in Phillips. I helped set up the Phillips room on Phillips History Room because Penn and I happened to be the last 15, 20 years. I was a historian of Phillips, so I handled all the papers of Phillips, and so I knew where most of it is. In fact, I don't know.
I asked you one time, and if you had any
I still got them, but I'll have to get them someday. I'm in taping all these old timers.
Yeah.
I mean, I got stuff that I'll
we
have to get them.
We need to make copies
Sure,
of that before I start.
But I'll tell you, there's some of them, some things you got to be. I'm not putting this on tape.
I realize it's sensitive.
Well, for example, you have to set it in context. I know that, for example, there used to be a lot of steelers. God, that steelers fellas are already knowing it. They go out in the tank, you know.
I'd like to ask you about the Phillips 66 Oilers. Any observations, stories, funny things, interesting things that had to do with the Oilers? Tell what the Oilers was.
The Phillips 66ers, and that's always
They were the 66ers, right?
they were the Phillips 66ers, but you know, of course, that was started back from Boots Adams came to Phillips. He came in first, I think, 21 as an iceman, working for another company. He went to work for Phillips, and he was on the first basketball team, and we had some old timers on there, but it started small, but over the years, the Phillips 66ers developed into just another way to advertise our products up and down 66, see, and of course, Billy Parker's playing with another one of early ways to advertise Phillips. But the 66ers was a great promotional scheme. And went on, we played around the universities, different universities. We'd go to where we were requested, we'd have the game. We didn't charge them anything, see. And we'd fly in, but it was primarily a Phillips goodwill promotion. And it got, in fact, they won. You remember, Bud Browning was a famous coach. And I think they won 2 or 3 AAU championships, and they also Bud coached the Olympic team a couple times, I believe. But we don't have it anymore. The Phillips 66ers. What I started to tell you when we they got them and called us the Phillips Oilers, so we missed the publicity. But the Phillips 66ers kind of died out because. Not because of the publicity gimmick, but because we couldn't get players. You know, in the last 10 years or so, the pros takes all the good men. You just can't get the people. But the 66ers was tremendous. Now we're doing a lot now. Right now, for Phillips' major point, and old Bill Martin, the chairman, we're spending $100,000 on promoting swimming in Olympic swimming. Well, when Bill, each chairman of the company had his own fort. You know, Bill Keeler was a Cherokee, chief of Cherokee. And his great ambition was he was appointed chief of Cherokees by 3 or 4 presidents, but he never was elected by the people. So back in about 8 years ago, Bill Keeler wanted to run for first time as chief of Cherokee. I was his campaign manager. And that was something. In other words, Bill Keeler, I spent a lot of time working with Bill over in Eastern Oklahoma and being his campaign manager to get him elected chief of Cherokees. And I'm very proud that we got 90% of the vote. We got almost all the full-blood votes. And I am adopted Cherokee. My name is Utohi, faithful worker. So I'm Utohi, faithful worker. I'm an ambassador and adopted member of the Cherokee Tribe. So, but most of my work has been developed in Eastern Oklahoma.
Do you remember anything in that campaign that might give me anything that happened in the campaign?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. First place, the Delawares and the Cherokees, are married. Sometimes I call weak cousins, But I'll tell you one thing. Yes, sir, we had some people. Those Cherokees and Delawares, some of them were still pretty friendly back in those hills. And I remember that they were pretty vicious, too, and pretty dangerous. They just loved the... Oh, I can remember the thing. We had the hog fries, I know you know what a hog fry is. Every time we'd have a political rally, we'd get some of the people, and they'd get together some of these big barrels and kill 4 or 5 hogs, fill it full of grease and heat it, and they'd cook those, what they call, just chunk up the hog, and cook those hog fries in that beef fat. And we'd always have a hog fries, these rallies, and of course Bill would make a political speech, and tell about the Cherokees and what he wanted hope to do for them, in other words, if you remember the Cherokees, Pendleton, they were their own worst enemies. They fought each other so darn hard that, historically speaking, that they absolutely, it's just almost impossible. Now, Mr. Keeler, Bill Keeler, the chief, probably did more for the Cherokees than anybody in the world. But there's always a group that didn't. In other words, some of the full-bloods that didn't like it. See? So Bill probably spent $2-3 million of his own money, and he achieved so much for him. See? Now that whole big Cherokee complex over there now, it was Bill Keeler's baby. And I'll tell you a story about Bill Keeler. Whenever we started talking about the Solagay Theater, Calico, which is the world's only air-conditioned outdoor theater. They'd been trying to put that together a long time, and finally Bill Keeler sent a group back to Tennessee and visit the Cherokee group back to Tennessee. It has that one, you know. North Carolina, Cherokee, North Carolina. So we came back, and that's where we really got started. When Marty Haggerty, Bill Keeler, myself, and some others, we began to put together the Solagay request. We got $600,000 from EDA. And I remember I took several tours with the EDA people, including Fred Harrison always was. Fred Harrison was a lot of senators. He did lots of good things. But I remember that when we started building that thing, of course in August it gets hot, and nobody wants to go anywhere in August. So they started talking about air conditioning, and of course they said it couldn't be done. But Bill Keeler was determined that we were going to air condition that Solagay Theater. And he did a lot of research, and he was our expert, and finally came up with an idea of his that we'd use the old supermarket method for the, cool off the vegetables and all, and heat and cool air stays down. And so today that is air conditioning. And it won't be 60, but it'll be about 80, 85, and that's in August, and that's cool over it. And that, of course, Solagay has been a tremendous success. It was one of our ideas to, we need places in eastern Oklahoma and Oklahoma. We need places, destination points, Pendleton. Heretofore, people went through Oklahoma on their way to somebody else, kind of like going through the Holland Tunnel in New York City. You go in a tunnel and come out of Oklahoma. So one of our major objectives was to establish destination points. Now we did that at Solagay. Shangri-La was a tremendous asset to East Oklahoma. Green Country, we worked for the Kerr home down at Poto. We had a committee, we worked with them. Now that home has been given to the state, and now it's going to be used well, that's all. The Cherokees, I enjoyed working with them. I took a bunch of these Cherokees hunting one day, turkey hunting down on a reservation somewhere in East Texas, and that's where I learned that these Cherokees, they didn't miss a shot. Anytime a bird or anything got up, they killed it. They were good shots. I also took a bunch of them fishing down in Mexico. They're good fishermen. But the Cherokees are good people, and they have come a long ways in the last 25 or 30 years. And now today, from Phillips, from Green Country, from all of the corporations, Salvation Bell, OG&E, Public Service, Retta Pump, from all these great companies, the banks, I'm proud that I was able to work with them, and they presented their money and their personnel. And today, Green Country, Northeast Oklahoma, 21 counties, is actually a booming place. And all you got to do is go through it to see that now we have people working. We're keeping our young people in Oklahoma. We're creating them jobs. And so there's nothing but good ahead for Eastern Oklahoma and Green Country in Oklahoma.
Who was Keeler's opponent when he ran for
Ralph, his opponent was Ralph, a young lawyer from Tahlequah, Ralph.
You think of Rothschild. No, well, that's right. What was the, you may think of the name, but what were the opposition? Was there any opposition points made?
Oh yes, a lot of opposition to Bill Keeler. He's actually about an eighth Cherokee, and I think he's also part Choctaw. But Bill Keeler was one of the successful men. He was successful and went to the top. And I think mostly it was resentment. They resent a man succeeding. Bill Keeler went up from the very bottom. Now, Bill Keeler was the only man I ever known that fired Phillips. He was fired from Phillips back in, back in Borga, and they hired him back a little later on, see. They fired him for that time. He's young, and he was kind of a wild inning, see. But he's got a brilliant mind, see. But Bill Keeler came back. He never has forgotten it. He's Cherokee. Oh, he looks more like Cherokee than most of them do. But they kind of put a lot of full bloods put what they call half breeds on a different plane. They don't recognize it. See. But that is still a problem among the inners. We got so many mixed blood. See, and a lot of the mixed blood. See, Will Rogers mixed blood. See, Bill Keeler was mixed blood. Hastings was mixed blood. See, very few of the full bloods ever got out of the hills. So, but Bill was able to. We helped Bill, but we organized a real political campaign.
See, that 90% of the vote, the opposition never got very much.
Well, they run against something, and Bill Keeler run on his record. See, he started all this development over in East Oklahoma. He ran on a record, and he had the right people behind him. But I say mainly we just ran a professional campaign on politics. But anything else?
Going back to the Phillips 66ers, who do you recall as some of the outstanding players whose names you remember, and maybe some of them who were from the Phillips 66ers team that moved into executive positions with the company? I know a number of them did.
Oh, there's lots of great Phillips 66ers basketball players. One of the greatest was, of course, Bud Browning. Bud Browning came out of Oklahoma University, and I recall watching Bud play in university. Bud was what they call a dead shot from 20 foot out. He never missed a shot from 20 foot out. He was a tremendous shooter 20 foot out, and that was his sport. And of course, the greatest guard of all Phillips team, in my opinion, was old Cab Rennick Cab Rennick was from Oklahoma State University, and he was a tremendous guard in college, and he was a tremendous guard in AAU, and of course an All-American. The early days, of course, it was they were just ball players, and you could almost say it was kind of barn lot basketball in the early days. But there's of course, Bill Martin was a terrific ball player. Bill Martin came out of OU, and he was an All-American. He was a great basketball player, and Bill, of course, after he got through playing basketball, he entered our treasury department, and he worked up in the treasury department as treasurer, and of course he went on to president. Now he's chairman of the board of Phillips. Bud Browning, of course, had an executive position. Phillips, Paul Endicott, of course, played under in Kansas University under the great founder of basketball, and Paul was given the great basketball trophy from what trophy is that out of Kansas University? He was given Paul Endicott was one of the greats. He was president and chairman, and Slick Hewitt, was one of the first ones, and.
Well, these are good. These are names. I think you named those that I was hoping you would name. Do you have anything else in your notes that you haven't mentioned?
Oh, I'll tell you, another one of our things we're pretty proud of around here. I should have mentioned. I'm on the board of the Tom Mix Museum, and that is another attraction. Tom Mix, that's the dory though. Tom Mix, though, we call it part of it there. Tom Mix, the town marshal up it. We got that as a first one. You got Tom Mix was huh?
Yes.
Okay, I want to do it. Oh, another thing that Phillips did, you want to know about Phillips homecoming? Back some 15, 20 years ago, Frank Driggs come to me and he had about 25,000 or 30,000 photos, which now are, and so he told me he'd sell it to Phillips $25,000. So I prevailed upon Phillips. Ken Rue, in fact, Ken Rue was the vice president of public relations at that time, and we got a donation $25,000, and we bought the Frank Driggs photo collection. Now all I wanted to miss, of course, was the first photographer's shop burning, and most of the early day photos are gone. But
what are these photos on?
Oh, they're of early day Bartlesville, early day Phillips operation, early day tank farms. They're just almost any kind of a picture that you think of is most of them in this area. And of course, the how did Green Country get its name? We, as I told you, Green Country was first Oklahoma Northeast was organized, 16 counties. We went along till when we started our advertising program, we learned some lessons. We knew we had to, if we were going to advertise, we had to be professional. We couldn't go amateur and amateur, so we were going to have to be professional. So we wrote every advertising agency in Oklahoma to meet with us and give us a program on how they would sell Northeast Oklahoma to the rest of the United States. And then we was in the public service room. We met in the public service room of down at Tulsa boardroom. We first interviewed, I think, 12 agencies. We cut it down to 3, and the main ones, and Beals Advertising Agency from Fort Smith, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, came up with a program and the Green Country name. And of course, that's the reason it was a perfect name for the time and for the position. I'm not much of a, I don't know. This is excellent. So you think anything else? I missed a little part earlier, but it sounds like. Well, let me tell you something I wrote down there. All right, good. In other words, I think most of my probably 67 years is probably learning from experience of Penland how to get the job done. And I learned a long time ago that working with these top executives that they expect perfection. And also I mentioned about, but another thing I learned from these guys too is that, in other words, if you're gonna do it now. In other words, Phillips Petroleum Company, like most companies, if they're gonna do something, they gotta be sold on, and they'll do it all the way. They don't go in things halfway. And another thing I can tell you, I was associated also, Penland and Oak Muggy. In Oak Muggy, I worked for the Creek Nation Museum there, and I worked early at that time. I was working on my master's at OU and so forth, and I wrote a story which is appeared in the Oak Muggy paper on Timmy Jack Uchi, the last man hung, on a council ground. And I learned a big lesson there. You remember, I spent a lot of time when I was younger, doing research on the creeks, and I uncovered a very valuable photo of the Timmy Jack Uchi family. Who borrowed that one to borrow from one day? As it was old Judge Williams, down Durant, and I'll never forget back. But I learned a lesson. I'd never learned of historical photos, unknown ones. But old Judge Williams still had a rare, terrific photos. Let him arrange to get a copy made. If I'd have known anymore, but what I learned, and of course. Oh yeah, I know. I remember I used to sit around our race listed. Oh God, I used to talk to Booth Adams a lot, and I remember for a while, for several years, I also was a kind of coordinator of Phillips contributions. You can imagine the stack of contributions I have to get every day. And I remember I used to worry about turning them down or getting them turned down. Old Booth Adams would say, Charlie, don't ever worry about turning down a contributor. If it's important, you come back. But don't worry about it, because we got something they want. What time is it? I see. Let me go to what I'm here.
Well, I think...
I'll pay triple standing particularly on early on that.
Great.
I think perhaps...
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
This has been an interview with Charles Cummings of Bartlesville, retired executive of Phillips Petroleum Company and a leader in many different areas, particularly in the cultural and economic development of Oklahoma, and mostly so in eastern and northern Oklahoma. And we certainly appreciate having this opportunity. Thank you very much.